what get you started to settle down your plant in Hong Kong?
So I'll hit that on a few different fronts. So one, salary, the average salary is about $35,000 here.
Okay.
That, I mean, when I was in Silicon Valley, opening salaries are typically 80 to 100,000 US.
Okay.
So Silicon Valley is very expensive. The rest of the world is, 30,000, 35,000 is a nice salary.
Okay.
So it's high, but it's not crazy high. And people generally live in very small apartments, but when people talk about the cost of living in Hong Kong, they're talking about the open rental market, which is very high, but about 2/3 of Hong Kongers have subsidized housing from the government. And then their rent is much more reasonable, or they live in a micro apartment, with no kitchen. So the salary goes a long way, and the taxation is only 15% here. So that, at least from a salary standpoint, is a good thing. Now, another thing is that in America, the most common college degree would be liberal arts. It would be history, English. I myself graduated in philosophy, and it churns those people out. Here in Hong Kong, the vast majority of people go for engineering degrees. So not so much software, but electrical and mechanical engineering. So there's just a massive pool of people that you can hire. And in America, the mechanical engineers are so much more rare and so much more expensive. Now, why we're here, my very first job when I was quite young was at a bike school repair shop. Okay, and I got very early on a lot of respect for people who actually get in and actually make things work. Right? It's all very nice to design a bicycle on a computer. It's a very different thing to make it, ride it, repair it as it breaks. And so I had to get someplace where people actually got their hands dirty and actually made stuff. And in the West, there's this attitude that things should be designed on a computer, and then we send them out to the factory of the world, who will then make it and send it back. There's this hilarious TV show called *Halt and Catch Fire* it's about the PC revolution back in the IBM PC days, and they invent a PC clone, and the plot's all about inventing the PC clone, and then they say, okay, it's done, we've done the design, and then the next episode is, and the machine has returned from Taiwan, and it's done, and everybody open the box and do quality control test, right? At that point, you're screwed. It's like the machine is built, it's in a box. Talking about quality control tests. You find a defect, you're dead. These people sitting in Texas designed the machine, quote unquote, and then some Asian people made it and returned it. And of course, our genius meant that it returned without flaws. That's just a completely false narrative. It's not how you make something, and it's one of the reasons that so much stuff in stores is so low quality, is because the people designing are not getting their hands dirty, and they're not actually talking and having a real relationship and getting the respect of the people who actually make it. So I first saw this when I encountered this company, ZPM, that was making a Kickstarter espresso machine, and they designed the machine, and then they handed it over to a fabricator who was in Los Angeles, who then redrew everything from scratch and handed them a massive bill. And ZPM was very upset about that bill, but the reason they redrew it is because the people who designed it knew nothing about building, and the drawings were useless to build. Okay. So the same thing happens all over the world. You've got to get engineers who actually make things to talk to the engineers who design things, and they've got to sit in a room and hash things out. So I'm in Hong Kong, or the company's in Hong Kong, because I could hire those engineers, and because they would have the same language of the suppliers who are bending the sheet metal and all that. So all the dumb stuff that we get comes from the Chinese mainland, okay? That sheet metal and all that sort of thing. Some smart stuff too, like they are the world leaders in making PC boards, right? That's why all our phones are made there. But more esoteric stuff like flow meters, pumps, valves. Well, the Italians are the masters of those things. Sometimes
Okay.
the Swiss with flow meters. And Hong Kong is unusual in the world for two reasons. And I know it's much in the news. I'm not going to talk about that at all. I'm going to talk about why it's unusual for us. So first of all, it's the only country that I know of, or rather I should say territory in the world, where foreigners have the same rights as locals. You go to
Okay.
Taiwan, you go to America, foreigners do not have the same rights as locals. And I
Okay.
have my Hong Kong ID, and I have the same rights as anyone else. In some ways, I have more rights because if the locals are suspected of cheating a foreigner, it goes very badly for them. So that's number one. So number
Sorry to
yep,
interrupt you, John.
yes.
Did you before you set up this, before you have this company set up, have you been to Hong Kong for travel or vacation or have you been working in Hong Kong prior to
I was
this?
on holiday in Thailand, then going to Bali, and I had a layover here for just 2 days. And something happened that made me completely fall in love with Hong Kong. And that's where I was in a kind of cruddy neighborhood, really packed with Chinese signs and no cars anywhere. It's just steps everywhere. And I was walking up the steps and there were railings, and the railings were completely wrapped with knit flowers. Like as far as you could see, knit flowers everywhere. And I thought, this is a place where there's a fair amount of chaos, there's creative people. And again, I'm not going to talk about current things. You can ask me the questions about current things, but I can't talk about current events at all.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry. I mean,
So,
one of the absolute rules of Chinese culture for 2,000 years, and this is an absolute rule of Chinese culture, is you stay out of politics if you don't want to get yourself in trouble. And it's true now, but it's been true for thousands of years in China. People like me, we focus on our lives, which is coffee and the people I hired and my relationship with them. I don't get involved with governance
yes.
at all. So that's all I'll say on that topic.
Okay.
So the Hong Kongers for a bit over 100 years have been a UK colony. And one thing to note about Hong Kong is it was a place of refuge. It was a place where people fled other parts of the world. They fled the Chinese mainland, but they were also a place where people were fleeing other oppressive governments. And it's a sanctuary. So people here are very independent and they're creative. One of the questions was, is it hard to communicate with them? So the school system is entirely in English. So all the engineers, every class is in English, every exam is in English. So the level of written English is extremely high. There's also a tradition of all engineering being done in English, even with the mainland, because it's a very clear technical language. Like, there's no word, for example, for silicone in Chinese. They refer to it as oil rubber. And it's a very vague word. So people use English in that sense. And having had companies in the West, I'll also say that this tradition of focus on your job, focus on your position, don't focus on these bigger things, means a lot less office politics and very directness. Is one of the things I love about Hong Kongers, and it's the thing about Cantonese. So most people don't realize that there's no such thing as the Chinese language. There's Mandarin, which is the dominant language in the
national language, right?
Right, but in the South, and it's massive, they speak something called Cantonese. And Mandarin's, a beautiful, high art language. You can hear it in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And Cantonese is a street language that is very heavy on punning and wordplay. So I'll give you an example. The word for barista is dead coffee. And people joke with things like that. They're always constantly making fun. The Hong Kongers love just like constantly, everyone's always joking and laughing. And I like that quite a lot.